and we're going to talk about responsible AI, and I'll describe a little bit about what that means. So here's the agenda really quickly. We'll talk about why responsible AI. We'll walk through a few principles and about the life cycle. The why part is, first, let's make sure we're defining a true problem. And as we go through the individual principles, we'll define them, and then we'll give use cases and examples. And then I want to make sure you're aware that this is not something that we at Microsoft or we as practitioners should just talk about, but there are frameworks in place to provide structure for organizations so that they can be more intentional about incorporating responsible practices amongst their organization. And then we'll finish it with a closing and answer plenty of questions, which hopefully there should be. I want to give a little bit of a preface. My aim in this presentation, as I show many different examples and visuals, is not to call out any individual. It's not to call out an organization, even though some of these organizations are competitors to Microsoft. That's not what the aim is. It's not to single anyone out or to single out an organization. It's to bring awareness, because you'll hear me say a line pretty often throughout this presentation. The AI that we develop is impacting people, whether directly or indirectly. And often the consequences as a result of those impacts, they don't deserve nor did they ask for. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're doing the right thing. That's what this is about. So let me give you a little snippet here on what that is. Here's the debate. They say a picture is worth much more than 1,000 words. And you're looking on the screen now between AI, Google glasses, and lenses that police officers can use to profile individuals. You're looking at how military organizations are using drones for targeting. And you're looking at profiling of individuals, or if you do a simple Google search of CEO, how it just presents solely white men on the screen. So we're going to peel back the layers on each of these and discuss how we should do better. So let's first set the problem. Let's set the table. When we talk about responsible AI, why do we need to talk about it? Nearly 9 out of 10 organizations across many of our technological leading countries, 9 out of those 10 organizations, and this is broken down country by country, have at least revealed that they've encountered ethical issues. 9 out of 10. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we have to think about how the use and the implementation of these AI systems, how many of these have you heard about? Now, there's plenty of stories that are filling the news wave, and given the most recent pandemic, a lot of these stories get pushed to the back of the news cycle. They get pushed last in line. But we, as AI practitioners, as business leaders, need to also be mindful and keep these in the forefront. So this is setting the table for, this is a global issue. This is not a US issue. This is not just an issue for France or Germany. This is global. So what are we going to do about it? Second part to why do we need to talk about responsible AI is, well, how evolved are the technologies these days? I mean, you can read and see YouTube videos all day long about some of the advancements. I'm not trying to imply that we have some general artificial intelligence that exists. In fact, I think it's the contrary, but we are making significant advancements in the technology space of leveraging AI. Significant. You can look here at some benchmarks that have been met, and this is actually on the Microsoft side, so I'll speak to Microsoft more specifically, but in 2016, for a select set of objects, we were able to hit human parity for our object recognition technology that we have built.
Dr. Anthony, I'm sorry, excuse me one moment. I do have some attendees that cannot see you and they're unable to see the screen. So I can see your screen. Can you take a look at your dashboard to the right, just to make sure that the screen presentation is on for everyone?
Yes, the screen presentation is on, and let me share my camera as well. Okay, great. So can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you. And can anyone else see him? Okay, now they're able to view. That's what it, okay. Perfect.
Great.
Anyone else having issues? Just want to make sure.
I don't think there are any issues right now, Lisa. A lot of people have confirmed that they're able to see us, so we're good to go.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Let's do a quick time check, Lisa. So I know the original was from 10 to 10:30. Do we have any allotment to go a little bit past that?
Just a little bit, just for the sake of recording. And so if you can you start it at the beginning again, and then we'll start right there. Okay, we're able to edit. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
For those who missed it, just a quick review.
Yeah. So what we're going to go over is why responsible AI. Let's build the case for why this is important, not only just a national issue, but an international issue. We will discuss some key principles. We'll define them and we'll give use cases and examples of where these principles were either challenged or completely disregarded. And then we will discuss a little bit about the responsible AI lifecycle that the Microsoft team has put in place to help organizations, to help Microsoft partners to incorporate a responsible AI framework within their organization. This needs to be an everyday thing. And then we'll close it with questions that will allow the audience and the attendees to be able to see. So what we talked about is how a picture, we've heard the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in the world that we live in today, a picture is worth much more than 1,000 words. The ramifications of a single image and the decisions that are being made off of some of the AIs that we incorporate can be extremely damaging and then oftentimes as well as very advantageous. But whether you're using some type of glasses to incorporate AI, or whether you're using drones to make military and combat-like decisions, or whether we take it down to just a simple Bing or Google search for the term CEO, which I challenge each of you to do right now, and how the fact that with that search, a list of single white men appear up on the screen. These are all challenges that we want to address. The slide here was referencing that this is not just a national issue, but an international concern. If you take many of the technological leading nations, a report showed that 9 out of 10 organizations across the world have reported that they have encountered ethical issues involving AI. And so if you think in the last 2 to 3 years, how many of these issues have been brought to your attention? And so there are many news stories within the news cycles today that have captured our attention, more specifically the most recent pandemic. But even beyond that, there are challenges and issues that maybe are going unreported. And it's incumbent upon us that we take this head on. I was bringing up the fact that when we're making the case for responsible AI, you have to ask about the technology itself. Is the technology truly warranting our attention and our focus? And I would venture to say yes. Now, I'm not trying to imply that we have some general AI, general artificial intelligence that exists and robots tomorrow are going to take over. That's not likely, nor is it really relevant to the fact that we should be more responsible with what we're building. But some of the more common tasks that you see on the screen, like vision, speech recognition, reading, all the way down to language understanding, we're making so far advances and it's evolving so quickly that even back in 2016, for a select list of objects, Microsoft was able to develop a model that reached human parity. In other words, our model could do just as good as a human at determining what that object was in the image. That's how quickly things are evolving, and that was nearly 4 years ago. So let's think about this. So we talked about the fact that I can resonate with being a business leader. I co-founded an organization and I help head that up as well. And then I'm also an actual data scientist and AI practitioner. So there was a study that was done on Stack Overflow. And if you've ever coded, I'm sure you're very familiar with Stack Overflow. There was a study done that was sent out anonymously to developers. And let's go through a few of those results. The first question was, as a developer, if you were asked to write code for an unethical purpose, would you? And you would notice here that roughly 60% clearly said no. but only 4.8%, let's just round it up, 5% said that they would. And we wish that it was all no, but that's going to lead itself to something. We'll see what the next study is here. And then the 36% said it depends on what it is. So the machine itself is still very powerful, even amongst the developers. And then if you ask the question to a study of 64 developers on Stack Overflow, who is ultimately responsible? So maybe this is why some people would still do it, because maybe they don't feel responsible. And you'll notice that roughly only 20% of the respondents said that the developer themselves are the key stakeholder and responsible for what ends up being developed. In other words, 80% of them are willing and intending to pass the blame. Now, listen, I'm a developer, so this is not intended to knock the developer. It's intended to point out that from both ends of the spectrum, there's a level of responsibility here. There's a disconnect between responsibility and implementation. Let's look at another study. Do the developers have an obligation to consider these ethical implications? And 6% said no. Roughly 80% said they at least have a responsibility to consider them, but maybe not be responsible for what ends up being developed. So this just points to we collectively need to do more. We collectively need to bring these issues to the forefront. So let's talk about a couple of these principles. We've made the case for responsible AI is important. Let's look at some examples of where they have actually revealed themselves. If we go through these 6 principles, fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, accountability. We will define each of these and then we'll go into specific examples, okay? Let's start with fairness. If we define fairness and you think of it in terms of our AI jargon, you think of bias. So fairness would be free from bias or injustice and even-handedness. Then we would say things like, I have to admit, in all fairness, that she would only be paid for the part of the work that she had done. Have anyone seen this image here? I think we're all familiar with the vast services that Amazon provides, and one of them is their same-day shipping for their Amazon Prime service. This was a study done in 2018, to be clear. So what you're looking at are the actual geographic landscapes of where the service is provided across some of the more popular metropolitan areas in the country. Again, this is not intended to knock Amazon. In fact, you'll see that amongst this, Amazon has made it very clear in the article that this was not intentional. But we're not just focusing on intentional, we're focusing on the impact. But big picture, what you notice here, if you look at Boston, amongst this metropolitan area, there are gaps where the service is not provided. It just so happens, coincidentally, that those gaps also correspond to lower economic individuals. There's a clear demographic effect to where the service is not provided compared to where it is provided. Now, when this scenario or this situation was reported, Amazon responded, and Amazon clearly indicated that they aligned the service for same-day delivery with the concentration of Amazon Prime holders. So their implication was, we are only doing this because there's a heavy concentration of individuals who have Amazon Prime, not realizing that their data-driven approach to wanting to serve or provide the service for the same-day delivery actually still ended up being discriminative in its own way and excluding individuals. So I'm going to bring it back to the same statement that we opened with. People are impacted directly or indirectly who do not deserve the consequences. And that's something that we need to be mindful of, that sometimes our data-driven approach may still be unfair to individuals. And this is just one example. So I encourage you to look at the link, and I can provide that link to you to this study, and I can provide links to every one of the examples that we give. But this was just one example of where the unfairness presented itself. Let's look at another example. This image was submitted to by an Asian American who was looking to renew their passport. Part of the technology, when it analyzed the image, you would notice what gets circled at the top. It says that the subject's eyes are closed. This is challenging and concerning. No need to call out the organization itself, but I want you to understand that sometimes the technology that we develop, although may seem cool, although may seem impactful and changing in other ways, is unfair to individuals and may present forms of bias. Imagine being this individual and seeing these were the results of what you were attempting to do. Certainly, I'm going to give every organization the benefit of the doubt and say that this was not intentional, but it still had impact and still had a consequence. Did the technology that was developed not have a large enough data set considering Asian Americans to account for the fact that maybe the orientation of their eyes is different than maybe some other ethnicities or nationalities? I'm sure that there are multiple reasons underneath it. Let's look at another example. Millions of Black people affected by racial bias in healthcare algorithms. This is another challenge that we're facing even currently in the pandemic. That without certain access to healthcare and healthcare policies, people are treated differently. And it's even supported and backed by data, which often the algorithms are developed to optimize in some way or fashion ways to generate money. But there's an impact to that. And sometimes we don't get articles like this to reveal it to us. We need to tackle this before we develop some of these technologies. Let's take the example that we discussed a little bit earlier. I challenge you to go into your Google search or your Bing search and type in the word CEO, and you'll see a list of predominantly Caucasian men. Now, this is not to say that Caucasian men shouldn't be CEOs. That's not what it's saying at all. But where are the women? Where are the minorities? Sometimes an inherent bias or unfairness that is unintended, but again has consequences. And this story, I challenge and encourage you to look up as well. We'll speak to where those biases really reveal themselves. In 2015, Google was one of the first to release an actual facial recognition program as part of one of their services that they offer across their vast suite of services. And what revealed itself was that the service was really good at identifying Caucasian people. But in one instance, it actually identified a Black person as an ape, as a quote. The service responded to a Black face and said an ape. That's unfair. This was not intentional. I am not trying to call out Google. I will repeat this over and over, but it's important that not only we test the services that we build, but we build these services based on a robust set of data so we're not biased, so we can be fair. And these are all examples that have revealed itself. And the consequences of these examples are really just touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of the impact that they have, but they're still impactful. So let's talk about the next principle, reliability and safety. If we define reliability, the ability to be relied upon or dependent for accuracy, honesty, achievement, well, let's think about the safety piece. If you want to be safe, it's a freedom from the risk of injury or danger or loss. So when we talk about the quality of averting or not causing an injury or danger or a loss, where does AI play in this? Well, let me give you an example. I think we're very well familiar with the company Tesla and the most recent push for autonomous vehicles. But the question that we should ask ourselves is, when and under what criteria are we comfortable with autonomous vehicles? What are the bounds set and the thresholds being set such that we're comfortable with releasing such a technology? Because a vehicle is very powerful and can be very dangerous. And if we're not mindful of this criteria before we release it, then the consequences could be immense. So let's take, for example, here, how many miles should an autonomous vehicle drive before we determine that it's safe? How many lives should be lost? Now, imagine quantifying that. You only lose a certain number of lives. That's tough to justify. So how many fatalities per 100 miles? How many injuries per 100 miles? How many, 100 million miles? How many reported crashes per 100 million miles? These thresholds need to be set. These thresholds need to be considered for the public safety, for the public good. And we want to have organizations that present themselves as reliable for the public safety. It's a fun technology to think about. I actually took a drive on Tesla myself, and if you go on one of their test drives, they'll take you on the highway, and they have this autonomous feature on the highway, given the less busy traffic, etc. And you can let go of the wheel, you can let go of the pedal, and it's an amazing technology. But we've also seen some stories where the autonomous driving has led to deaths. And even in its limited capacity of being rolled out, that's a concern. So we have a responsibility before we implement, before we release any AI, that we're mindful of fairness, that we're mindful of reliability and safety. Let's talk about privacy and security, a major concern. The advancements of AI should not compromise our privacy, should not compromise our security. If we think of privacy, the state of being free from unwanted or undue intrusion, how much of your life must you reveal for an AI to be effective? Or again, we think about safety, or security, we talk about that freedom from danger or from risk. So tourists must respect the tribe's privacy. Those who wish to smoke can do with the privacy of their homes. That's how we define privacy. Have you ever thought about the Roomba and how the Roomba uses its own technology to navigate your home and essentially collect that information in a manner that it knows the design and the layout of your home? Now, that may not concern you. I mean, I don't think you should worry about intruders or anyone barging into your home, but I think that there is still a concern that there is a device that has the ability to navigate your home, and whether you are aware of that or not, these are the type of technologies that we're developing. These are some of the implications. And again, there are people, whether directly or indirectly, who are impacted, who don't deserve those consequences. There was a study done in 2012 how a Target employee also figured out that if you could determine if an individual was pregnant, then you could market to them in a manner that was extremely profitable. Okay, the marketing piece about being extremely profitable, that's nothing new. That's been around since the beginning of time. But the question we should ask ourselves is, how are they going to find out that you're pregnant? Is it because you buy some form of baby material or clothing? I could be buying that for my niece or my nephew. But there are means in which organizations will go extensive lengths to find out some personal information about you to turn that into profit. These are the types of things that we need to be considerate of because of the impacts that they may have. Privacy for any individual, more specifically for a woman, and I will openly admit I am a mama's boy, heart and heart, and I cherish the women as in general. That's something so sacred to you that it should not be intruded upon. That privacy belongs to you. And at what lengths are organizations willing to go? Maybe a compromise. Here's another example. Company suspends use of mall directory cameras running facial recognition software. If you've seen these large-looking kiosks that appear to provide information and then have this small camera at the top that are running facial recognition to determine your location of where you are at every moment, simply so they could advertise to you. The ability to be able to do that nowadays is actually, you can get that nearly off the internet, that facial recognition technology. And then this captured database gets stored within the organization itself. I think the challenge here is the fact that that technology was being leveraged and was not made public. There was a lack of transparency here. So that your privacy was being infringed upon without your knowledge. That's a concern. These are things we have to take into consideration because there are impacts and there are consequences. Let's talk about inclusiveness. We talk about including someone. You are wanting to encompass them and to the limits or to the extremes of consideration, account for an individual, then we're all different. We're different by race, we're different by abilities, we're different by physical challenges and handicaps. So inclusiveness needs to be intentional. Take, for instance, the KW versus Armstrong case. And if you're not familiar with this, I encourage you to look this up, to give this a Google search. And when I provide the slides here, you'll have access to the link down at the bottom. But the fact of inclusiveness and how AI can exclude individuals, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has consequences for individuals that they didn't ask for. Let's talk about transparency. And I'm moving a little bit quicker here in the sake of time. I know we want to get to some of the questions as well. But let's talk about transparency. How we need to be able to be seen through to talk about transmitting rays, but we want to have an openness. We want to be upfront and for allow individuals to see through. So then you have a choice. So then you understand. What if I told you that in the city of New Orleans, that there was a company that was actually using technology to help police officers predict who individuals may be and their likelihood of crime? They were using predictive analytics for policing strategies, but didn't tell anyone. Now imagine the amount of doors that opens up, the ability to profile and incorrectly profile, and the impacts that they have. And then to back it and support it by data. And that lack of transparency, where's the data coming from? These are, again, challenges that challenge the key core principles that we should have in place for any AI, for any advanced technologies. And the last one is accountability. When we define accountability, being capable of being explained, explicable, you want to justify something, you're responsible for it, there's an answer to it when something or a challenge arises, you're accountable for it. Let's go back to the autonomous vehicles. Even if the thresholds are met for reliability and safety, what happens when there is an accident or a fatality to a vehicle involving a vehicle that did not have a driver? Who's accountable? Is it the driverless driver? Is it the company or the organization? Either way, the impacts or the ramifications of what this vehicle, this massive piece of metal has done, someone needs to be held accountable. And that's part of where our justice system is able to thrive, is the fact that there's an accountability for when laws are broken. But where's the accountability lie for some of our advanced technologies? If these questions aren't answered ahead of time, that leaves us in a very challenging state. So again, if a robot kills someone, who's to blame? If a driverless car crashes, who's to blame? So we need to think about what happens when algorithms mess up, not just driverless cars. What about the algorithm used to determine whether someone was likelihood of or credit worthy? What about the algorithm that will determine whether someone deserves a specific type of treatment simply because they could afford it or could not afford it or based on their healthcare policy? Who's responsible? Is it the organization that implemented the algorithm? Is it the developer on the back end who helped develop the algorithm, who have multiple tests of showing how accurate the algorithm is? I spend many of my years and my days in that seat proving and justifying the algorithms that I helped organizations to put into place. But as the consequences of these implemented algorithms and AI technologies continue to grow, I would hate to be responsible for something that I helped develop at the instruction at the head of the organization that I work for, but I am. So let's get to the part about what we offer at Microsoft is an actual technical workshop. We have a multi-day workshop where we go through these principles and we help organizations to actually put in place a framework so they can be considerate and mindful of these principles throughout the full development and ideation lifecycle of any project or any technology. So here's a snapshot of what that life cycle is. When you talk about, you start from the core, we're considering the key AI principles that we just discussed. And we go through and we define them. And these principles mean different things to different organizations. And that's just fine, because it's intended to be a framework that an organization can take, mold, shape, and make their own. But as you go through and you envision how you want to leverage AI, and you define what these principles are, and you define the corresponding metrics, and you want to build a prototype, and you're willing to test out that prototype, and then you actually go through the build phase of how you're going to incorporate. And right when you're ready to launch this technology, you still need to be able to monitor and to track and to be prepared to evolve. Because if there's one thing that we know about life that is true, is things change. People change, society changes, and rules and bylaws change. And so therefore, we need to be flexible, nimble enough to be able to change along with that. Because no matter what, there will be consequences to everything that we develop. And sometimes these consequences have impacts that people just don't deserve. So that concludes my presentation for today.